Well, this is our clash of realities that we're now living in, isn't it? You've got the British Prime Minister saying America has to stay put once the deal's been negotiated and guarantee the backstop and guarantee the peace. And you've got the American president making it absolutely clear that once the deal's been done, they're out of the building. And it's up to us. Nothing to do with America anymore.
Europe's problem.
Yep.
He's been defending... I was looking at the figures. I think America has provided 44 or 45% of the cost of Ukraine's defence against Russia. America has.
America.
And it's stopping. That's it. It's now down to Britain, the rest of Europe. We've provided about 5%. We're still providing $3 billion a year, billions of pounds, in fact. And I think people watching this programme are thinking, how many more billions do we want to keep giving to Ukraine for a war they won't win?
Is it time for a reality check here? Is it time for someone to say to the Prime Minister, you may think that America should act as the backstop here. You may think that America, and you could be right, morally speaking, that America should continue to pick up the pieces, but they're not going to.
Well, I think what Keir's doing is showing leadership here, actually. He's trying to leverage the historic position of the United Kingdom to get a deal. And I think somebody's
Where's his leverage?
I think, well, he's got a good relationship with the White House. He's going to visit the White House in the next week or so. He's the first European leader to go to the White House. There is a rapport there, even though lots of people expected there to be a poor relationship. By all accounts, it's a reasonably good relationship. He's going to go there. He's going to say, look, right, I'm prepared to put peacekeeping troops in there, but we need a deal. And somebody's got to try it. Somebody's got to attempt to get a deal. A deal might not come off, by the way, but I think the fact that he's trying is a positive thing.
But the only trouble is it could all fall apart so easily because it just takes President Trump to turn around and say, no, there's no security guarantee, there's no backstop.
Absolutely.
And then we're hearing from Europe, we've got, you know, Schultz, haven't we? You've got the quote from him saying, I mean, we're not putting in any European troops, we think it's premature.
This is on day one after the news broke that there were going to be direct talks between Russia and America, and you've got the British Prime Minister going to Paris and saying, right, come on, everybody, let's show America that we're serious, that we're going to take this seriously, we're going to up our defence spending, and we are going to put troops on the ground, let's get a Euro army together, let's get into Ukraine once the peace is done. And what does Germany say, Charles? He says, this is completely premature. It's highly inappropriate. I'm a little irritated. So there's no support coming from Europe.
No.
There's no support coming from America. Don't you feel that we're reaching the end of an era?
There's no support coming from the British military because they're saying to the Prime Minister, how can you do that then? Because we don't have the military capability. No. I'm not blaming the Prime Minister for that. He's only been Prime Minister for 7 months. But because this military force has been hollowed out over years and years and years, we're down to a tiny little army. We don't have the resources. Even if he agrees to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, that'll be an extra $6 billion this year. How much difference is that going to make, really, in terms of defending Ukraine as a peacekeeper?
So isn't that an issue? He's trying to show leadership, but actually, if President Trump turns around and says no, and if the rest of Europe or a significant number of European leaders turn around and say no, we won't support the plan and we won't put in peacekeeping troops as well, it all falls apart.
Well, yes, but at least he's trying. And some of these European leaders have got to sort of wake up and smell the coffee, frankly. I mean, an aggressive Russia on our borders is a big crisis for Europe. We've got to play our part. And look, what Keir is doing, it might not work. Let's be honest, you know, it might not work. I totally accept that. But at least he's trying to hammer out an agreement with the US and the EU. Well, somebody's got to try. At the moment, no one else in Europe is attempting that.
Well, he could start by saying, today, I'm telling the Chancellor we are increasing defence spending right now. But instead he's saying, oh, no, we've got a defence review coming out. We'll be on a pathway to increasing defence spending.
Where does that money come from,
And how long is the path?
Where does that money come
from?
Because it either means cuts or tax rises,
well, he can cut our bloated foreign aid budget.
Meanwhile, you've got the American president saying to the Ukrainian leader, you're going to have to give us a great deal of money. We want billions and billions of pounds in rare metal concessions as reparations for the money that we've already advanced you and the weapons we've already sent you. In fact, it's been calculated that America is asking for more reparations from Ukraine than the West asked from Germany after World War I. Which led to World War II.
I mean, it is unbelievable. I mean, Zelensky did put this suggestion on the table with the White House a few weeks ago that there may be a deal around these very critical minerals that they have, which can be mined in Ukraine. And in this day and age, these critical minerals are so important for technology and so on. So he did put it on the table. But again, this is all about negotiation. It's all about deal-making. And as I said yesterday, 90% of diplomacy goes on behind closed doors. So yesterday on the show, we thought the US wouldn't put troops in. There's now been some suggestion that they might consider it. So let's see where we get to.
We shouldn't be surprised as well that America wants its money back from Ukraine. This country only paid off the American war debt about 20 years ago, some 50, 60 years after the Second World War. They were an important ally. We couldn't have done it without them. But they sent us a bill, and we were paying it for decades.
Those debts always have to be paid. Well, we're counting down at the moment, aren't we, to these talks starting in Saudi Arabia. It's due to start 7 o'clock this morning, where Russian delegates will be talking to US officials about some kind of peace plan. We're just looking on Newswires here, where they're saying Russia hopes the United States will hear Moscow's position in these talks. There is a danger of what's going on behind closed doors without any other country there to oversee it, to put the position, and what that might lead to, isn't there?
Yeah, well, I think as you were saying yesterday, Richard, this has echoes of Czechoslovakia, doesn't it?
1938.
I mean, Ukraine does need to be involved in those discussions some way. I mean, I think they've turned up there, haven't they? Whether they'll get in the room or not.
But you see, people like you, quite rightly, keep saying that. Of course, Ukraine should be a part of the discussions, but they're not. No. Yes, they've chartered a plane, they've landed there, they're hanging around, just like Czechoslovakia hung around the hotel where the talks were going on between Britain, France and Germany in 1938, but nobody let them in the room. And there's no sign that Russia or America are going to let the Ukrainians into the room.
How frustrating is that when it's your country and other people are deciding its fate and potentially may turn around and say, OK, well, that territory that's been seized, forget it, you're not going to get it back.
And the countries around Ukraine are also being excluded from the talks.
Absolutely.
And the Russian Foreign Secretary couldn't have been more contemptuous when asked if European countries are going to be allowed in. Absolutely not, and he was contemptuous.
Are we looking at victory for Russia here? Are we looking over the next few days at an announcement coming both from Moscow and Washington, which effectively says Russia's won this one?
Well, it feels like they've won it already, because, look, as I said yesterday, a month ago, before Trump's election, Putin was a pariah internationally. He's now at the top table, dictating what happens to the country he wants to control.
There seem to me to be so many empty debates, which we've got to have, because we know what the answer is going to be. One of the debates we will be having on this programme later today, it's an important one, but I think we all know what the answer is going to be, is could we have a Euro army? Could basically the nations of Europe come together and create a unified army? Well, if Britain and France can't even between them manage to stop rubber boats crossing the channel.
Right, we can't protect the English Channel.
Exactly. How on earth can we run a Euro army?
And they can't stop the boats crossing.
I mean, what the EU do is up to them, but no, I can't see Britain playing a part in the European army. I mean, that doesn't mean that our army doesn't cooperate with the armies of other nations.
Well, that's because we haven't got the capability to go on our own, have we? We need to do it in collaboration.
Well, yeah, we do need to cooperate and collaborate, as you say. But it does come back to the point you were making. I mean, our armed forces have been hollowed out. They were the words of the previous Conservative Defence Secretary, because they've been cut and cut and cut under 14 years of the Tories. I'm in favour of increasing defence expenditure.
Yeah, but when? Now?
Well, I want the government to get on with it.
They're going to wait for this defence review. And how long does it take for that to come in?
Well, the government are doing a big spending review where they're looking at all the priorities on public expenditure, like the NHS, like schools, like policing, and they've got to look at it in the round. But I want to see defence expenditure
what gets cut,
increase.
do you think, to allow that? Or is it raising taxes? Where will that money come from?
That's the big question. I mean, because at the moment we know that the public finances are a state. This government inherited a burning skip when it comes to the public finances.
Yawn.
There's going to have to be some tough...
Yawn. That one again.
I know, but it's true, because that Liz Truss...
No, they exaggerated it. You've exaggerated it, man. It's been exaggerated.
She left
such a mess. No, it's a catastrophe.
She left such a mess.
Angela Rayner who's whacked us with £40 billion of blooming tax rise, which we don't need, and the economy's straining under the weight of it, and the tax rise haven't even come in yet.
Clear up that Liz Truss.
They haven't even come in yet.
I think we might have had this conversation before, mightn't we? Just a few times.
They've got it on. It's on speed dial.
Just coming back to what's happening between Moscow and Washington, is this Europe's long-delayed emperor has no clothes moment? That we've kidded ourselves for decades that we're more important and more powerful than we really are on the world stage, and now cold, hard reality is biting us on the backside, that actually we don't have any say in what's going to happen. It's going to be sorted out between Russia and America, and we're just going to have to go along with it and make the best of it.
Well, we have relationships, and the UK does have a good relationship with the US, but Europe does have to step up to the plate. I think it was the leader of Poland, for example, saying yesterday that his country have invested in defence, and he wants the other EU countries to invest in defence and get their defence expenditure up. Europe are going to have to recognise this.
Well, increasingly, 2.5% is seen as not enough.
Exactly.
And 3% is seen as the bare minimum.
And Poland is spending over 5%. They're next door.
But they've also said they won't send troops in, though. They're in a more organisational, sort of supportive role, aren't they? So they've made that clear.
This has been a long time coming, this. And Trump signalled where he was coming before, but he was a joke. He was never coming back. I mean, it was pretty obvious to me for a year he was coming back. The West we should have been prepared for this, and it's like they've been caught completely unawares. When he said war's over on day one, OK, week 4, he meant it.
Yes. Is it because we've got away with it for so long? We've had so many American presidents going back, we were saying yesterday, going back to Eisenhower, Kennedy, saying to Europe, you've got to pay your way, you've got to stop relying on us. And we've said, yeah, we'll get round to that. And, thanks for the check. And finally, realities.
And Biden gave just enough money for Ukraine to stay in the fight, but never enough to win it. No. That was a problem. And now we're in this stalemate. And it looks to me like Biden won't... that Putin keeps all his ill-gotten gains.
Which will send out a signal to him that he can do it again, won't it? OK, well, let's turn to matters closer to home. We'll keep an eye on those talks when they start at 7 o'clock and obviously report on any developments as we hear them this morning. Closer to home, when we're looking at spending, how money is being distributed. There's a petition being put into Downing Street today over the winter fuel payments. This is from charity Age UK. They will deliver a petition with 650,000 signatures to Downing Street, demanding action to make sure that this never happens again over the winter fuel payments. They say 3 in 4 pensioners lived in uncomfortably cold homes in January. Up to 9 million pensioners left shivering at home after the cut in winter fuel payments. I mean, Jonathan, this was a tough one, wasn't it? That actually a decision had to be made. We heard from, Labour politicians that actually to balance the books, this was one of the things that was going to have to go. But it was a difficult one, and it meant that a lot of pensioners couldn't afford to heat their homes in the way that they wanted to.
Yeah, and I think I've said on the show umpteen times when I've come on that I'd have done the means test in a different way. I mean, I don't think Richard Branson, for example, needs the winter fuel payment, but there must be a way of doing it up the income scale because it was either everybody gets it, or they've just done it for people on the pension credit.
And some people just missed out on it, didn't they? Which was really hard.
Tried to look at a different way of doing it. But remember, the pensioners are going to get a generous, substantial increase in the state pension in April because of what was called the triple lock, the way in which the pension increases year by year.
This was to heat their homes over winter, wasn't it? Do you think there'll be a rethink over this for next year, having seen the backlash, having seen the consequences?
Well, I think these things are always kept under review by chancellors. But I used to, many years ago, was a bag carrier in the Treasury for Gordon Brown. I was around when this was introduced. The reason it was introduced is because in them days, the pensioners didn't get a triple lock increase. You've got a very small increase in the pension in April, so you've got additional help at Christmas. Once you brought in a big increase in April, the argument goes then, some of these other benefits you don't necessarily need. That's the argument.
Andrew, do you think that Labour has actually weathered the storm on this one?
No.
We heard from Laura a few minutes ago, warm weather's coming in at the back end of the week. This long cold spell's coming to an end, warmer weather on the way. Do you think they've actually got away with it?
If you try and get a Labour MP privately to say they agree with it, they think it's insane and cruel. And they'd be right. And it's ironic, Jonathan mentioning Gordon Brown. In Gordon Brown's final speech to Labour conference as Prime Minister, he listed his government's achievements. Now, it was a rather longer list than I could have come up with, but his first achievement was the winter fuel allowance. And
showing its significance.
Its significance. And Rachel Reid, as a student at Oxford, she had a poster of Gordon Brown in her room at Oxford, and yet she demolished his greatest achievement. It's just vindictive. It survived 6 chances, this tax, and we know when Labour were in power, when the Tories were in power in 2017, when Theresa May was considering getting rid of it, his lot, Labour, published research showing if you got rid of the winter fuel allowance, 4,000 pensioners were at risk of dying because they wouldn't be able to put the heating on. I suspect we've lost pensioners this winter who couldn't afford to put the heating on because of the winter fuel
paper today about one lady who's just saying that in her home, she is never warm unless she's in bed. That's the only time. It just breaks your heart, doesn't it?
People go to libraries, they go and sit in cafes.
But do you think they'll drop the whole idea next winter?
Well, if they ought to. I'm amazed she didn't.
What do you think, John?
Courageous chancellor would admit they got it wrong.
They'll tuck it away and think, well, we got away with that. We won't try it again.
I would
restructure it.
I would encourage them to always look at this. But of course, to link back to the previous conversation, if you're going to do a big increase in defence expenditure, which I think we all agree with, where's the money coming from? I mean, resources are finite.
Foreign aid budget.
You're going to have to take tough decisions.
Foreign aid budget, mate.
Well, that's already being reduced.
No, it's not reduced enough. It's 15 billion a year. Cut that. Start the charity at home.
Can we talk about British prisons? Scotland are releasing thousands of prisoners early today. It's causing a huge row north of the border. We'll be reporting on that a bit later. We're also going to be talking about this propensity for prisoners to get their hands on mobile phones in prisons. It seems now to be an unstoppable flow, that prisoners can use mobile phones to order takeaway food, drugs, call up drones, fly the drones up to the bars. There seems to be a perception, certainly, that in British prisons now, provided things stay reasonably calm, it's easier to let them get away with it. It's easier to let them hang on to their phones because it keeps the peace. What's your thinking about this?
Well, I mean, I think the story where prisoners are doing TikTok videos on their mobile phones, that sounds absolutely unbelievable. That shouldn't be allowed. How can it shouldn't be somebody doing social media videos on a mobile phone from prison? How can they get away with that?
So we have the parents
They've got to crack down on this.
Of Jimmy Mizzen. He was murdered, and they're calling on social media companies like TikTok to ban their son's killer because this footage emerged of him on... This is Jimmy Mizzen here, their son that was killed. New footage emerged of him on TikTok while he's behind bars, and there are big questions about how this is working. Is he posting on social media? Is someone else posting on his behalf? But
it's sickening.
Dreadfully upsetting for the family that this is going on when they're supposed to be banned.
Yeah, look, prison shouldn't just be about punishment and incarceration. You want them to be rehabilitated, but having access to phones like that is crazy because prisons are full of drugs and mobile phones is how they're getting them in. And TikTok, get off it.
You couldn't make a sitcom like Porridge today, could you? Because the reality of life in prisons, as portrayed, of course, humorously there, with Fletch, is simply not the case now. It's simply not the case. Do you feel that there's an argument for a full-scale root and branch inquiry into the state of British prisons and for major reform? Because it does seem to have drifted completely out of control.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be fair, the government have got a former Conservative Justice Secretary called David Gauke to come in and do something of an inquiry into the future of prisons because we don't have enough prison places either, and that's another issue about spending. If you want to spend on defence, does that mean you obviously can't build more prison places? And yet we've got more criminals, more people who should be locked up. So what do we do? So I think there is an inquiry coming out, but I mean, people obviously feel very upset, understandably, if they see prisoners getting released early. But if there's so much pressure on the prison's estate, what else can you do?
Particularly when they cock a snoot like they did in that first release, when there was that guy outside his £150,000 Bentley saying, "Thank you, Keir Starmer, I'm going to vote Labour for the rest of my life." Not a great look,
could you?
You couldn't.
Maybe that was from Porridge. It seemed that surreal. What does the Daily Mail make of Kevin Badenoch's speech yesterday, echoing J.D. Vance's last week, saying that Western values are in peril?
Look, about time we heard from her. And it was a powerful speech, well received, and I think we've got a lot of support for it because it's very difficult for a leader of the opposition to get their voice heard when they've only got 121 MPs.
Yeah, I noted you say it was nice to hear from her.
Yes.
That's an implied criticism.
Yeah, look, she has this strategy. She says, I'm not going to come forward lots of policies now. The election is 4 years away. But you've got to have a presence. You've got to make your voice heard. People have got to know who the opposition leader is, because currently a lot of people may think it's Nigel Farage.
But she's sinking like a stone, really, isn't she? I mean, she's got good coverage in your paper today, but she is sinking without trace, and I think they'll get rid of her. I'll have a 10 bob bet with you, Richard, that she won't be the Tory leader.
I'm not going to take the bet because I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
Because I mean, a Conservative leader in opposition has to have impact, has to have poke, and at the moment,
she's only been there about 6 weeks. So, but you have to compare her 6 weeks to Donald Trump's 4 weeks.
She needs time to bed in, though.
She does.
Who would it be, though, if it wasn't her? That's the issue. Who would be next in line?
Well, I mean, they'd go back to who they fought it out with before, Robert Jenrick or James Cleverly. I don't know. That's part of the... I mean, Boris is the leader across the water, but he hasn't got a seat, and
no.
So I can't see him coming back anytime.
He was sort of getting itchy feet about wanting to come back into the fray, wasn't there?
Well, he's always got an eye on the main chance, Boris, hasn't he? Yeah. He's still very... I still think there's still huge popularity for Boris Johnson out there.
But you don't sort of win elections or pre-election campaigns with broad, sweet approaches like this.
But what she's trying to say is she's
on train fares, the economy.
Yeah, but she's trying to say, I'm going to define myself by who I am and what I stand for and what my values are. So she's saying it was appalling that the grooming gang scandal was allowed to go on for so long. Those gangs were operating under a Conservative government. Equally, it was Labour local councils which were turning a blind eye and local Labour police force turning a blind eye. She mocks Keir Starmer for taking the knee over a murder that didn't have any impact in this country at all. So she's going for big issues which I think people resonate with.
Yeah, but I think Nigel Farage is running rings around her, isn't he? I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? The Reform are really sort of eating into her support.
Well, they're beginning to eat into your support too, man.
Oh, yeah, I mean, Reform are a challenge for Labour. I'm not complacent about Reform, but they're really an existential crisis for the Tories, I reckon.
It is a big... Look,
it feels like a time of big change, doesn't it?
It does. And look, people often talk about Mrs Thatcher. Last week, it was 50 years since she became Tory leader, and she had a pretty rocky start as Tory leader. She didn't have Reform to face. She was just taking on a Labour government that was falling apart.
Do you get that sense, though, in the political system, that actually things are feeling very different now to how they felt for years?
Well, when you look at the opinion polls, the three main parties, and I'm now including Reform as a main party, that shows you how far they've come on. I mean, they're all bouncing around at very similar levels, but I think that is going to be a big problem for the Tories, because Tory MPs are going to start looking at that and thinking, crikey, what is our future here? And that's why I think they'll get rid of her.
More might go to Reform, do you think? Is that what you mean?
All kinds of things could happen.
I think there's disillusionment with them. The reason Reform are doing so well, there's disillusionment with both main parties. People are fed up. They think it isn't working. That's why, even though Starmer got a huge majority in Parliament, it was on an extraordinarily small share of the vote. Tiny, one of the smallest share of the votes since the war. What is it, 34%? That's all voted for him, which means only about, of the turnout, so that is only about 20% of the country. The country are fed up with both parties.
And actually, at the moment, it's in a difficult situation because things aren't getting sorted out and, you know, it's been blamed on the last government and then people feel like, well, actually, we need action.
And let's be honest, don't think many people think this government's had a terrific start, do they, Jonathan?
Well, the think tank that I run on my day job, Labour Together, we do polling on this all the time, and they really want the government to deliver on the economy, the cost of living, the NHS, yes, borders and small boats as well. So Labour have got to show progress on that, and they've got 4 years.
Because that doesn't seem to be happening so far, does it?
But there is I mean, this Parliament will run until 2029. So if Labour, when they go into that next general election, have got to show they've made progress.
It'll all be on the results.
And while he may be making predictions about does Kemi Blade not survive, a lot of Jonathan's colleagues in the Commons are saying, is wooden top Keir Starmer still going to be there?
He will be there.
But is he still going to be leader?
He will be there.
If he was an actor on stage, he'd play he'd play the tree.
You and him have got a similar hair.
He'd play the tree.
Who'd get his job? Wes Streeting?
I think finally the Labour Party might decide after 125 years they need to pick a woman leader.
Yeah.
That'd be very novel for you.
Well,
a woman leader for the first time.
I'm in favour of Labour having a woman leader.
So that would be...
I've supported Yvette Cooper in the past, for example.
That would be Angela Rayner.
But Keir Starmer will be
I'm not so sure.
be leader for the next 5 years.
I'm not so sure.
Take Labour into the next
I want to ask you about your fridge habits.
Oh.
Do you sniff your food when you... Do you sniff your food when you take it out, when it's on its or just past its sell-by date, and ignore the sell-by date if it smells fresh?
I always ignored the sell-by date.
Right.
Always. When I grew up, we didn't have them.
No.
They're a modern thing to...
So how do you tell that the food's fit to eat?
If it's got green on it, you cut it off, and if it's smelly, you chuck it.
What about you, John?
I think if it's green, unless it's like, you know, Stilton cheese or something, if it's like got green mould, I mean, I can't
All
eat
right.
it.
Well, maybe that's a generational answer. The reason I'm asking is, according to the Telegraph this morning, Generation Z, or do we say Z, who knows, and millennials as well...
our age, I think, if we say Generation Z.
I know, yeah. And millennials throw food away before it's gone off, and even ahead sometimes of the date on the packaging. This is a study that's been done by Harvard. They say that this includes any labels such as best before, use by, or display until. These young people think that means that the food's gone off and it's not safe to eat, and it's perfectly safe to eat.
They should try it. It's absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, you know, unless there's something green on it, which just puts me off. I mean, I would... You know, ignore the...
When we were growing up, we used to cut the green off the cheese. We would cut the green off the cheese when we were growing up as kids, and I still do it.
Discard that bit. But there's a difference between, obviously, best before and use by, isn't there? So one is saying you can eat it afterwards, but it might not be at its best.
I eat after use by as well. If I smell it, it's fine. If it tastes fine. I've not been sick for years.
I find that most food, even 3 or 4 days after best before, is fine.
Absolutely
I mean,
fine.
we should just probably say for health and safety reasons, so that is your view.
That's
I don't want people to
personal
think that you can eat everything, like meat and fish after.
No, but sniff it. Look, Harvard say that young
date.
people have lost the ability to trust their senses when it comes to checking if, that's all I'm saying, if food is safe to eat. It leads them to rely completely on dates on the packaging instead of smelling, tasting, or just looking at the produce. Sometimes they just chuck it out without even looking at it, which leads me on to the other food story this morning. According to our favourite newspaper, the Daily Star, Generation Z are getting back into meat. After a long flirtation with vegan diets, meat is much, much higher now in their priority.
Is it because they can get cheaper meat?
Is it because what?
Is it you can get it cheaper?
I think that it's come down to cost. I think that's what it is, yeah. So that's
Packet of sausages, not so expensive.
Well, I've never been a vegetarian, so I'm all in favour of
vegan. It's different.
Oh, God.
Well, there's no doubt, is there, that there was it was almost like a fashion, that somehow meat was seen as crude, almost immoral.
Yeah.
It was almost immoral to actually go out and buy a steak. Yeah. And that does seem to be fading again.
Yeah, but these mad net zero lot, they want us to get rid of all our cows because of all the methane they produce. They say that's terribly bad for the environment.
Well, I'm a great champion of our great British produce, you know.
Good.
Meat and lamb and beef and lamb and pork.
Me too.
Should we end with a final look at some royal portraits? Because I think these are really rather lovely. This is the Princess of Wales and her 3 children. They've been revealing their artistic skills in a new set of portraits shared online. Here they are. They haven't actually declared who did what portrait, but I think you can probably work out whose is whose, can't you? But I think this is really lovely. And actually, I love the fact that, you know, the idea that they all sit around as a family and are doing portraits. And at least you can tell what these are, because, you know, sometimes the children, when they show you a picture and say, do you like this? And you're desperately trying to work out what on earth it's a picture of.
And then you're horrified when you realise it's you.
Really? Do you think I look like that?
Well,
I think that the Princess of Wales would be rather flattered with those portraits, don't we think?
I couldn't agree more. I think who do you think did that one?
Well, I think that was probably Kate, wasn't it? So that's the one with the sort of on the bottom of the screen there.
Bottom right.
Probably see. Yeah.
You think that's Kate?
I think so.
Yeah, I think the red one is probably little Louis.
Oh.
Do you think generally that that Kate and William are playing rather a blinder currently in terms of the PR war and the royals? Do you not think that they don't seem to put a foot wrong?
Yeah, high profile. She's blossomed, hasn't she, since she came out of her cancer treatment? And we see little bits of the children who are lovely, and yeah, I think they're doing really, really well. Unlike the other lot in Montecito. Long may they stay there.
Well, we don't know about that.
We don't know,
It
whether Trump decides to allow them to stay there or not would be a question, wouldn't it?
He may be coming home sooner than he expected.
I thought he said they could stay.
Well, he said it, but he said if he's broken the law, he'll have to be prosecuted, and then it'll be up to the courts.
You know what he's like. He speaks with forked tongue.
Yeah.
He says one thing on a Tuesday and then the opposite on a Thursday. As we are possibly about to discover in the talks going on in about 3 minutes from now.
Thank you both for now, anyway. We'll see you later, as always.